edition of the Recipes for Success in London. Thank you for coming. The recipes, first of all, are a series of interviews that aim to introduce you to people from different business backgrounds who are either working on projects related to Bulgaria or South Bulgaria. The recipes started in Sofia and they've been taking place for a couple of years already, more than a couple even. And they're co-organized by Tuk Tam and adventurous. Those are two non-governmental organizations that help partner for events like this. Tuk Tam is, you can actually find information for both organizations on the sheet on the chairs. But Tuk Tam is something that started out in order to connect Bulgarians who had lived or worked abroad and who had come back to Bulgaria and wanted to trade experience. And then it actually grew and has ambassadors all over the world right now, including the UK. We host satellite events such as this one to expose more and more people to Bulgarian culture and society and economics, I guess. But adventurous is a partner organization and they're part of a global network called Teach for All. And they focus on improving opportunities in education. So they're partnering for this event today. And for our second edition, we have with us Ilian Iliev, who is somebody who was born in Bulgaria, but went to live in South Africa with his family. He was educated there, he was raised there, and he's co-founded several different companies who have dealt with anything from IP strategy to diagnosing malaria. And he's got experience from Africa and in Europe, and he's in the UK now. And his most recent, you can hear me right? I didn't ask. But his most recent project is called Eco Machines Incubator. He's actually working on, he will introduce it probably later on in our discussion, but he's working from the Rainmaking Loft right here, which is where we met him first. And so we're very lucky to have him, that he's going to introduce his ingredients for a recipe, his personal recipe for success and innovation in different business environments. So thank you now for being here. And let's start at the beginning. You were born in Bulgaria. How did you end up in South Africa?
Can you hear me through this one? In a slightly roundabout way. So I first moved to Angola, and then we moved to Mozambique, and then we moved to South Africa. Can you hear now?
Can we turn it up?
I'll just speak loudly. So for the older ones among you that are from Bulgaria, remember that in those years there were cooperation agreements between Bulgaria and various countries in Africa and elsewhere that we were helping build socialism. So that's how we ended up in Angola, then Mozambique. So we're part of that very exclusive community, Bulgarians from Angola and Mozambique. Mozambique there were 400 found. There's still about 100 there. Thriving.
Well,
they participated.
And so you there with your family?
Yeah.
And they're working on something, I guess.
They were both engineers. So,
and they were there for a special project?
Sorry?
They were there for a special project?
Well, special project growing up, because I was 9 years old.
Okay. No, I mean your parents were raising them.
Yes.
Oh, so to raise them?
Yes.
Okay, that's exciting. So when did, I know that your first company, I don't know this very well, but I know that your first company started out when you were doing work with your dad, and that was in the electro industry. So tell us about that company. What was it called? What did you do?
Well, it's a funny story that so this was Mozambique at the end of the Civil War, and when a country ends a civil war, there's even more opportunities than when a country ends communism. So I think at that point we were talking about maybe 10 or 12 different opportunities, anything from importing cars and computers, which we did, to printing shirts. Remember that story with the printing images on t-shirts, which seemed to be a great opportunity at the time, to what in the end we ended up doing, which was a business in the industrial electrics space. So at one point we ended up building a power station and done some pretty heavy-duty projects.
Does that company still exist?
It does. Still.
And do you have any part in it right now?
Thankfully not. My father's running it without my assistance. And, to those of you who have any experience with a family-owned business, you must know that it's the most difficult thing to get out of because you can't exactly resign.
When did you get out?
Well, when I came to the UK, so I moved here in 2001.
And you moved here for your PhD. And how did that go?
That's been going very well. It's been a lifelong project so far.
How long? So you started in 2001?
Started in 2001, then I was a very good student for a couple of years. Then I got distracted. I started 5 businesses in the interim period, and now soon I'll be finishing it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's in Cambridge, just this school, right? And it's so how do you get accepted to Cambridge? I mean, I read that you actually told me that you were at Wits University of South Africa for your bachelor's and master's, and you were named best political science student. Did that help?
Very well.
Yeah. So you went to Cambridge as a beginner because.
No, basically, at the time and still wanted to get back to Bulgaria in one form, with one focus or another. And the idea at the time was I really wanted to get out of what I was doing. It was great, well paid, but it wasn't very exciting. And I wanted to get back into policy in Bulgaria. So the route I thought I would do that was to do a PhD in what at the time still was a very interesting topic, which is how to finance entrepreneurship, how to finance innovation in emerging economies. We were still an emerging economy. So I came to Cambridge and I spoke to some academics and ended up getting on the program.
So do you consider South Africa an emerging economy as well? It's your education in Cambridge as well?
Well, I meant to keep it light-hearted because it's Friday night and everybody's brains are already fried. But I'll give you one big thought. So at the time I was really kind of intellectually obsessed with the problem that what you could see in Eastern Europe, what you could see in South Africa and many other places was really an incredible opportunity to transform those economies. In South Africa's case, it was the end of apartheid, as it was moving towards a liberalized economy plus democracy. Bulgaria was the end of communism. I mean, these were in our once-in-a-generation opportunities. And at the time, what I could see was, just really wasn't going anywhere. And 10 years later, in both places, we can still, that's to an extent still the case. Whereas at the time what I was observing is you could see in East Asia there was this incredible track record of growth, of wealth creation. So why couldn't we be like them? That was basically the big problem. And then in the end I made it much more specific, looking at venture capital.
Yeah, because you're not working in Bulgaria right now. So what happened?
Well, I've built things, but as all of you here know, you grow roots and you end up building a life somewhere. But I've left Bulgaria when I was 9 years old, but in one way or another, it's always been a part of my existence and interests.
And so you were in Cambridge in 2001, and you were living in the city in Cambridge.
Now, city is a very big word.
The town.
You should use it carefully.
the little town. And so you were living there, and you were telling me some stories about where you lived and what sort of experience you had. You did meet some valuable people who were also students at Cambridge. You started working with them. How did you guys meet? Where were you living?
Well, there was students from South Africa, should we say, community. When I say community, it's you meet in bars and college bars and other social occasions. You hear a lot about college bars. The Cambridge experience, most vital part of it. But the technology that we wanted to develop was originally developed by one of the founders in Wits University in South Africa. So he had developed OpenRS, relatively simple, that was interesting, using software and automated microscopy to detect malaria. Now, as you know, malaria kills millions of people every year, still does. And to this day, the gold standard of how you detect malaria is you've got a clinician that is staring down a microscope and counting how many bodies he identifies. So we had developed a way of automating that so that it's much more reliable and less labor intensive. So we built a business around that. We got it up to a point. But then I started learning lessons of entrepreneurship, which is when to recognize that something isn't, it reaches a barrier beyond which you have to decide, do you keep pushing or do you...
What was the barrier?
Well, in that case, it was several things. One was was a PhD team, and other team members had a greater focus on finishing their PhDs than I should say, brought out by history. But I think the bigger barrier was it just wasn't the right time. At the time, the main market and funding for these sorts of things were from the Gates Foundation, Wellcome Trust, the FID, and they were primarily focused on treatment and vaccines, whereas this was about prevention. The market now is ripe for that, and there are companies doing something.
And so the Gates Foundation would have funded something like that now.
Well, I don't know if they would have funded us, but they're funding others.
But tell me this story that I want to say. We're living in Stephen Hawking's house when we were in Cambridge, which was I guess
Well, he wasn't there when we lived. But he had lived there. It was this tiny, tiny little house. I think it's 17th, 19th century, and it was very quaint sort of building. But when we dug the history, it even had a further history than that, in the sense that it had been, I think in the 18th century, it had been a house of ill repute, I believe. He had also all this sort of crazy stories in Cambridge, but it was a lot of fun. It was really a unique concentration of like-minded people.
And the people that you were living with, were those your partners?
I've kept in touch with a lot, but
you also said that you kept in touch with your professors from graphics. And but anyway, so did you end up using that as connections just for the malaria thing for the malaria company, or did you end up using something else?
I've stayed in touch with them. South Africa remains an incredibly diverse and fascinating place in terms of everything from innovation, entrepreneurship, to culture, communities, political situation. It's really one of those places that never ceases to amaze me.
And so you're doing research now for venture capital and all those emerging economies. So are you using that anywhere right now for the project you're working on? But we actually worked with a Rainmaking Loft, so this is where we met first. So can you tell us what you're working on right now?
Sure. Well, I started Eco Machines last year, and basically it's some people will be familiar with the accelerator space here, so the likes of Seed Camp, Kickstart, or Y Combinator in the US. What I've been studying for 14 years now, 13 years, was how venture capital as a way of funding innovative enterprises differs between different economies. We all know about Silicon Valley, we all know about Facebook, Google, and all various giants that have developed on the back of venture capital, but how does it behave in other economies? So my focus in terms of my research was I was looking at South Africa and Hungary as it happens. But when you look at the UK, which is one of the amazing places in terms of generation of ideas and IP, if you look at London as a really unique global city which has everything you want in terms of launching and starting a high-tech business, the gap that I saw is that whereas there is a significant amount of venture capital here, most of it is focused on later stage companies. I'm sorry, I'm talking here about energy, clean tech, advanced engineering sort of things. And that's our focus. Now, in terms of where money is going mostly at the moment, it is mostly in the hot areas, which is developing apps and software digital media, which is great. I enjoy using it on my phone. But if you look at the global challenges that we have today, both in developed economies and emerging economies, it's around water, it's around food supply, it's around access to energy, not to talk about the climate change issues. So these problems are still there. Whatever the current fact is in the investment community, those problems are there and getting worse. So in a sense, what I'm trying to, the hypothesis we're testing, the problem I'm trying to address is how can you create a linear model of creating startups in the hardware and engineering space. The problem that VCs see in this space is that it's very expensive to back these companies. It really takes a lot of money to create a new waste management technology or a new robotic system. So the question that we're posing is, well, how can you make it linear, more efficient, more flexible, which in turn can make it more attractive to investors?
So are people responding to that, are you getting any investors? And it's working on the companies that you're, so to speak?
We've had a tremendous response. We are, lucky is the wrong word because it's a dysfunction in the system, but because there is relatively little amount of funding available now in this space, I believe it will change. We've had a tremendous response. In less than a year from launch where we didn't exist, we've had close to 200 applications now, thereabouts. And it's been not only from the UK, it's been from Israel, from Russia, from Eastern Europe, from Bulgaria, even from North America. So to me that shows not so much how great or how hot we are, it just shows the dysfunction that we have at the moment in the innovation finance system, even in a developed economy.
So how many companies are in your incubator right now?
Well, so far we've backed 5 companies. Well, it's, again, for a Friday night conversation, terribly boring. It's in the industrial lubricant space, which is very fascinating, but serious note, the company we backed is using nanoparticles, and the use of nanoparticles enables it to tremendously increase the lifespan, for instance, of wind turbines. Now, if you look at offshore wind, the biggest cost in offshore wind is, once you've installed them, is maintenance. That's what makes them so non-economic. So it's things like that that can make a big difference, much more so than reinventing wind. Another one is in the robotics space, and it's a robotics solution to insulating homes, which makes it easier and faster to insulate homes than is currently the case. Again, cutting down energy consumption in the economy. Another one is in the waste management industry. You're good citizens around here, so you probably sort your garbage. Now, the horrifying thing I found is that whether you sort your garbage or not, more than 40% of the garbage actually cannot be recycled at all at the moment. So it ends up in a landfill, it gets burned, or even better, we export it to China. Well, a few years ago, China said, well, we don't want your junk anymore. We still do. So all of a sudden, there's a problem where do you send your junk? You can't burn it, it's illegal. And it's very expensive to transport. So new technologies are coming out this way.
Okay, well, for example, in the engineering case, how far along is that company? How do you find it applies to you, and then what's the team like? How do they work?
Well, it's a bit of a special case. It's an Israeli-based company, and we participated in a buyout from an existing team. It's a spin-off from the Weizmann Institute, which is a great research institution over there. But you know, even in a relatively developed company case, you know, there's still a tremendous challenge in getting investors interested in something that really has a gigantic market in terms of the lubricant space. But the companies we back differ. Some are more mature, others are at the proof of concept stage, so we customize our approach to all of them.
And how long has Machines Incubator existed?
Just over a year.
And this is doing project right now. So, in what way do you work with the team? And you said you have a team of mentors from all over the world. Tell us about them.
So the key difference between us and a venture capital model, between the accelerator model and the classic VC model, is that in our model you're extremely hands-on with the teams, whereas in the classic VC model you're active as an investment manager, but you don't really get involved in a significant way in building the team, building the business. I'm sure VCs will disagree with that, but that's our opinion. In our case, what we recognize is we cannot be experts in everything. So we've built what I think is a tremendous community of experts and mentors. We've got close to 30, which is people from large corporates, from an investment background, from people from a government background. And the idea is that whatever company we pick, we know they're imperfect. The reason that they come to us for funding is because they didn't get funded by somebody else, so that they have a challenge. But if we believe in them and we find a way that we can address their challenges, we enhance their team and help them grow.
So you end up actually recruiting mentors for situations?
Well, whenever we look at the company, before we take them on, we ask ourselves, do we have somebody on our mentor group that's a good fit? We speak to them, we go through a fair amount of due diligence before we take them on.
So you said that your first company was your family business company. You've never had a boss in your life, right?
Except my wife, I suppose.
But so tell us about that. Is that good? Can you ever work in 9 to 5 with somebody over you?
Well, I don't know. I suppose by now I'm damaged goods, so nobody will have me. But look, grass is always greener on the other side. So sometimes the sort of experience that you get from working for a good big corporate or large consultancy or even a bank is tremendous in terms of helping you build self-discipline, good work habits, good work ethic. But ultimately, I don't think anything beats being able to create your own thing.
So why did you choose to base your machines incubator in the UK and not in South Africa? And your business is there, your companies there, your companies, I guess, and your US companies, so there's
Well, I chose to base it in London very, very important difference. I mean, I spent quite a bit of time in Cambridge, so I actively chose not to base it there, even though it's an amazing place.
You did base a company there?
I did, yes, and it still thrives. But London is an amazing phenomenon. It's a historical phenomenon. It's I truly believe it's the greatest city at the moment in the world and historically. There was a study about a month ago out by Deloitte that looked at London compared to other global cities and looked at the percentage of the workforce that is engaged in knowledge-intensive industries. And when you compare London to New York, to Paris, and other big global cities, London came out by a scale 2 times or 3 times greater proportion of the workforce here is in the knowledge economy. Now, this is a historically unique combination of people that are ambitious, interested, intelligent, with a variety of interests. And you put them all in it's a big city, but it's a relatively small city if you compare it to LA. So here we are, all of us, paying too much in rent or buying a house, but ultimately we're knocking against each other in this relatively small space with all these ideas percolating between us, and opportunities and networks. So this is a historically unique place to build any sort of business, including.
So would you say the startup community is just more developed London than South Africa?
That would be unfair to South Africa in a sense. In terms of just the global opportunities. We're positioning Eco Machines as a bridge to Europe, as a bridge to the world. So in that sense, when we're looking at Israeli companies, what we provide to them is a channel to global growth, a channel to building themselves into large companies in a way that they cannot do out of Israel or out of Bulgaria or out of South Africa.
So the 5 companies that you've taken on here, where are they from? So one's Israeli?
Well, one is Israeli, another one is quasi-Israeli, and the other is UK.
But what are the others? Or
UK.
UK. All of them are from UK.
The other 3.
The other 3. Okay. So how long have you worked at the Rainmaking Loft?
Since October, since September last year.
Is this since the incubator launched? Or?
We launched the incubator in February. We were first up in Shoreditch, which was a lot of fun. Left with a heavy heart. My liver is better since then. But we're in Central Berlin, which is next to the Google campus.
Okay. And have you ended up, because I'm working with the Rainmaking Loft, it's a co-working space, have you met anyone that helps out with the incubator from here?
Well, ironically, there's a company right behind us, not in the audience, that are using waste from coffee. It's a beautiful story. They're using waste from coffee to create biofuel pellets and biodiesel. So they're spot on in our field. It's amazing ideas like that. But this can only work in London because, again, here they've got access to P&G, Unilever, whoever it is that's active in that space. So from pure start to having actually some level of operations, it's been less than a year and a half. So there's lots of good examples. Right? It's really good and stimulating to be surrounded by exciting and ambitious people that are all doing interesting things.
So there's no companies from Bulgaria, though? Do you know?
Well, there isn't, but there's been quite a bit of activity from the Bulgarian accelerators, like 11 launch capital, that some of you might know. They've actually done pitch days here. So they're looking to engage with the London community. And I think with the, when you get a question there around, so these are not applicable in Bulgaria. And the answer is yes. I mean, there's lots of very exciting accelerators operating in Bulgaria. They're doing incredible work. The community that they're creating around them is extremely important and valuable.
What do you think they want to focus on software than hardware?
At the moment, yes, and I'm pushing them to change.
You are? How?
By talking to them every time they're here and re-emphasizing the enormous opportunities. No, I mean, on a serious note, Bulgaria has a proud tradition of engineering, of hardware in so many fields. You all know about the computer science, but also in agriculture, in heavy manufacturing, many other fields. We have that in our blood. We have it in our educational system. Many of the people that you see going into the software space in Bulgaria are originally material science engineers, chemical engineers. They got there because they don't have an opportunity to use what they developed first. And this is where we can learn from stories such as the Israeli story, where Israel in the 70s was economically a basket case. Despite the geopolitical influence that they had, they were a basket case in terms of economy. And it took them 20 or 30 years to get to where they are as one of the global technology clusters. So we have to learn from such stories, that these things take a lot of time and take consistent effort.
So do you have any other tips for Bulgarian companies who are trying to get in on software, or aren't on hardware actually, but are stuck in software somehow? And they that's the only profitable thing for you because it does.
I think well, a lot of the obvious things in software digital media have already been done. So if you try to redo Snapchat in Bulgaria, or if you do some software-defined cloud or something like that, that's already been done. So you might do something interesting, but it's not a huge opportunity. The huge opportunities that countries on the periphery, shall we say, have is to use what they have. So again, if you look at Israel, they're very big on agribusiness. Around agribusiness, they build lots of interesting software companies around management of agriculture. Well, what do we have in Bulgaria? We've got a big agricultural sector. We've got forestry. We've got winemaking, food industry. Just to identify one. There's obviously tourism and many other fields. So I think a country like Bulgaria, like ours, the big opportunities are in the overlaps and where you already are strong in the traditional sector that you overlap with software or high tech. They say internet is eating the world. Well, it is in traditional spaces that Bulgaria has some strength, which are also very big in many emerging economies that we have an opportunity to build something interesting.
But do you think it might be harder to launch a company that deals in hardware as opposed to software? You said you know that it takes a large investment financially to launch a company like that.
It takes more money, certainly. It takes a different mindset as well. At the same time, cost of living is lower in Bulgaria and salaries are lower. But I know of a number of very good Bulgarian hardware companies, some of them core suppliers to Texas Instruments, and others are supplying NATO with UAVs. There is really, really good stuff in Bulgaria, but the dots aren't joined. There is nothing in the hardware space that's similar to the software community in Bulgaria. Because the software community in Bulgaria has been developing since the 1990s when the original outsourcing started to happen in Bulgaria. So there isn't the equivalent community or the equivalent connectedness that would allow that part of the economy to grow.
So I know this is supposed to be a recipe, but
let's go back.
But you did reveal one of the ingredients at lunch yesterday. You were talking about the strength of weak ties, and that was interesting because weak ties sounds like a negative thing. But can you talk about that? That was really interesting.
Well, I was referring to the concept by the sociologist Max Gurvits about the strength of weak ties, which is what he was countering is the idea that when people talk about networks, they think of, well, I have 30 cousins in various ministries or businesses, and therefore I can do business that way. Well, the point that the sociologist made was that actually when you're looking at successful networks, successful clusters, successful sectors, it is where weak ties are strong. And what that means is that you have sufficient level of trust and a spirit of sharing, should we say, that you're able to connect to other people without having to have that extreme trust that this person will not steal from me. So this is how, if you give an example of the London cluster, or the Cambridge cluster for that matter, that with people that you might not know very much about, that actually you don't need to share with them, but there is a culture of sharing links. That you tell me your story, this is the startup you're working on, this is the problem you're working on, and I'll invest those 5 minutes to dig in my mental Rolodex of who could be useful for you. And I'm a firm believer in sharing in that way. Eventually, it really comes back to you.
So I think that's basically one of the main things that contributes to London being the way that it is, and is sort of trying to be that way as well.
Well, London is bigger, but I think it's a really important ingredient of any community. There's some level of trust and norms that enable this sort of sharing to happen. Whether it's a big place like London or a small place, a smaller city.
So what can I led you to your first ingredient? What are your other four?
I made some notes. Točka. So it took some time to think of this, but you see, I put some effort into it. Well, actually, my first point was around people, and again, a little bit of that experience. So it's not recipes for success; it's more hard lessons, that things I wish I had or hadn't done. And the aspect I'm also talking here about, the thing that I know a little bit about, which is around starting businesses and trying not to crash into the ground too fast. And I think the key aspect is around people, and part one is around picking your team very carefully. In a way, your co-founder or the business partner you're working with, you might end up being a longer period of time, or in a way more intensely than with your partner in life, at least some period of time. So it's very, very important to be quite careful when you pick that to set the rules of the game around that. A related point that I really believe in is to surround yourself with people that challenge you, and that involves kind of overcoming your insecurities to an extent. There is a good saying in the corporate world that A players hire A players, B players hire C players. So to have a really successful team that can handle many challenges, you really have to surround yourself with other people that you feel that are on the same level, or even better than you. So that's number 2.
Do you think you've done that? Or I guess you didn't at some point?
Well, if I did, I wouldn't have that lesson. So.
Yeah. I hope that you're not speaking about your family company. But I guess that sort of worked out, working with your dad and your both these players.
Yes, one of it, the other state. But I mean, the other thing that was, when I was thinking about the question you asked me, and there was a questionnaire that was sent. Well, I should give to your ecosystem. I think it's really important. And I think another aspect is, again, in the startup context, is with your first or second startup, not to be stingy. Again, coming from experience.
Isn't it very hard not to?
Well, there is that outside chance that your first startup is going to end up being something like Facebook or Dropbox, or one of those amazing success stories, first-run entrepreneurs. More than likely, it won't be. I mean, it would be really great if it's reasonably successful, but most likely, it will be an amazing learning experience from you, which you'll be very, very lucky if it survives and you actually make some money out of it. So, with the first startup, don't be stingy. Now, the converse of that is with the fifth startup, be very, very stingy. Because by then, you know most of the lessons, and hopefully you know exactly what you're doing and why you're getting into it.
So, where do you suggest you invest your money in your first startup? Because you have to have some sort of capital to get it up and running.
Well, that's the beauty. You don't have to have any capital to start it. You have to have good ideas, some time on your hands, maybe some bits of money. But again, in a cluster like in London, Cambridge, like many other places, you've got the internet. You can find out about any idea. You can do your research in the patent literature for free or whatever is the relevant space. So
you mean you don't need as much capital as you think you do to get it out?
Certainly a lot less now than 10 years ago.
Yeah. So what should you pay attention to first?
Build good ideas, build a good team. The ideas are cheap, execution is expensive, so get through the idea phase and start, get out and test your idea in the market, talk to real people. So one of the things that absolutely turns us off in the incubator is when we get the situation where I've got a great idea, okay, can you tell us about it? It's in this space, okay, I need to know a bit more, or we need to sign an NDA. It's that kind of precious attitude that really immediately shows us that the team hasn't, never mind about us, whether it was still the idea or not, hopefully not, but it immediately shows that the team has been unwilling to expose their idea to many people, which to me tells me, okay, it's a 2-person or 3-person idea, but it hasn't been exposed to 200 people or 50 people. Which means it's immature. And I'm not sure.
So in the incubator you mentioned, all these people there, at what phase are they at? Are they all in different phases, those 5 different companies that you've taken on?
To an extent, yeah. They're all pre-revenue, or at least don't have massive amounts of revenue, so they're all trying to prove themselves. Once they have revenue, then other types of investors will come in.
So what is it when you do an early stage startup in hardware? You just have...
Well, it's somewhat different from the software space in the sense that in software you can come in an idea and build a prototype in a week or in a month of coding. In the hardware space, if it's meaningful, it's taken a lot longer to get somewhere. If it's a new battery, or if it's a new engine, or if it's a new robotic system, it's taken a lot of work to get it to that point. Typically from a university lab, could be from somewhere else. So typically ideas have quite a bit of history, which also brings challenges because people have invested a lot of their time in that.
That's super.
Where well, it's a relative issue. It's what I mentioned. It's around business planning and strategy. So, firstly, it's really, really important to go through the effort of writing some sort of a business plan or just the exercise of building a market entry strategy. And then the second bit to that is, well, be ready to tear it up and do something very different. Once you get out in the real world or in the marketplace, you have to be open to your plan changing drastically, or in least start the code doing pivots. So it's the first casualty of war is the war plans, as we know. So it's really, really important to be open to opportunities, be willing to change the business plan. You're going out there not to execute the business plan. You're going out there to create a sustainable business. And almost certainly, whatever it is that you started with, that you won the entrepreneurship business plan competition, it will be very, very different if it survives as a business 3 or 4 years down the line. So I learned that because we tried to stick to our business plan for 2 years with my previous company, Cambridge IP, until we realized how tough we are and we followed the market.
So you missed opportunities in that case?
Absolutely.
Because you're so focused on your initial. Is that company still going? Can you tell us a little bit about that? That's your first independent company from your dad?
No, it's the fourth one. It's the first one that's survived. So Cambridge IP is based in Cambridge, surprisingly. So I have a long history of naming things to explain exactly what they do. Cambridge IP does IP in Cambridge. Eco Machines Incubator incubates machines that are eco. So it's not much mystery. So I'm not sure I will get a job in the marketing agency, that's for sure. So Cambridge IP is a thought leader in what's known as the patent landscaping space. So this is basically taking patent literature, which is the documents that protect your IP, things that Amazon and Samsung love to fight about. And now there are more than 100 million patents out there that they describe a big part of society or the world's knowledge about technologies. So you can use that information to build maps of knowledge, to understand how knowledge is evolving, what new ideas are coming out, to identify networks of inventors, networks of players in the industry. So you can use it in many ways, and we've done a lot of interesting work, I think, in the energy and cleantech space. So when there was the Copenhagen Summit a few years ago, we helped. IP was a big issue. The developing countries were arguing that patents are a sin almost, and the US was arguing the opposite. So we mapped out who it is that owns what. So that's what the company does.
So you're saying that after those 2 years when you looked away from the old business plan and adopted or executed the company.
That's when it took off. Yeah.
And when did you leave?
I left January last year when I started Eco Machines.
And so how long did were you part of that?
So we started in 2006, which makes it 6, 7 years. 5, but you see I've got 6. Give the next one. Well, Max, who was at the previous event, he had a... Sorry? No, I want to expand on this point. So he made a very good point that countries are overrated, and I think his idea was, about the ability to, not to focus too much on what country you live in or work in, and that a lot of it is part of the global community. And that's true, but I want to expand on that. If countries are overrated, then what is important? And what is important are, for me at least, are networks of knowledge, networks of ideas, networks of shared norms, because that really goes across countries, across cities, across sectors. And it's finding your place in one such network that really enables you to really start reaping the benefits of whatever it is that you've invested in, whatever ideas that you've done. So the era of the inventor sitting in a dark room under a candlelight inventing this thing will change the world. I'm not sure that ever existed, but if it did, it's long gone. It's the key to having any form of success as an inventor is really around exposing your idea to as many people as possible and also drawing from those ideas to create something.
Yeah, I think this is a little bit interesting, taking the mic or whatever, sort of bringing them together and introduce it. Okay.
The 6th point was related to the first point, and it's something I discovered when I came to uni here, which is that I learned much more about things that are interesting and relevant in the bars rather than in the classroom. It was a very important discovery. I'm not sure how good it was for my health, but so there's several lessons from that. I mean, one is pick your bar company very carefully. The second one is if you can't carry a drink, I suppose you should bring a dictaphone to remember what happened the previous night, and then you can transcribe it. But I think it relates to something different, which is storytelling. You know, we've only been translating and transmitting knowledge through textbooks for a not very long period of time. For the longer part of human history, we've been transmitting knowledge through stories, telling each other stories. And no matter how complex the message, whether it's quantum physics or Wittgensteinian philosophy or political economy, whatever it is, what I found there is that I would learn much more in a sort of an informal conversation, and surely you do the same. So it's around picking your bar company carefully.
So there's no storytelling in the classroom?
It's more structured, don't you find? Oh, you do English literature, so it's all about storytelling.
There's no structure. But, so what's one useful thing you can learn in a bar that you can't learn in a classroom? The most useful.
It has to be Wittgenstein.
Okay.
A German philosopher who changed his mind several times about entrepreneurial. I'm joking. There's many, but that was
Did you learn of him or of his theory?
I learned what it's about because I couldn't make head or tail of him. I tried.
And this is while you were at Cambridge. You're talking about Cambridge bars.
Yes.
And
but there are good bars here, not in Oxford.
No? Oh, you're still at Cambridge bar. Okay, so I have one last question for you. What is your MO in the Rainmaking Loft? If you could describe it in 2 minutes. How do people perceive you?
The modus operandi.
Hmm?
You mean MO, the modus operandi?
Yes.
Okay. Well, make it as early as possible, which depending on how late I am getting my son to school, is almost that, unfortunately. Coffee on the way here, then several other coffees, and try not to over-caffeinate yourself during the day. I think in a place like this you can vary between having some really productive head down time, but then also having a fascinating conversation by just walking down to one of the companies that you know down the road and explore a question or bump into somebody in the bar area or whatever it is.
Again, the bar.
Sorry, I meant the cafeteria. See it.
Go through it. Okay, I think I've asked enough questions. So we'll open it up to anyone who wants to ask a question. I'm going to ask it back in English so that Yep.
I'm sorry. Aren't you contradicting yourself in a way? You say there are a lot of opportunities in Bulgaria for manufacturing and stuff, and then we talk about how easy it is to do business and how much less investment you need. But then obviously, software is a lot of high margins, low investment for business. Well, manufacturing is a lot, it's high output, the margins, and also, when you have a country running at 6-7% inflation, and when you can affect 9% of cost of capital, how do you claim you can start a business in manufacturing?
Sure. Well, it's a good question, and I'm known to call many contradictions in my head at the same time, so that's certainly one of them. So what I mean is that to build a business or to build a technology in high-value manufacturing, advanced engineering has become much cheaper than it used to be. Still obviously more expensive than building a software product. Why is it cheaper? Prototyping is cheaper. 3D printing and rapid prototyping plays a big role in that because now a small company can afford to do prototyping before it goes to a factory that has or a bigger company that has the resources. A lot of it has to do with software modeling that is becoming, not for every field in manufacturing, but for many fields. Software modeling becoming much, enabling you to do much more development before you go into prototyping. A lot of it has to do with experience, with the ability to outsource work, to subcontract and so on. But fundamentally, if you're into hardware, it is always going to be more expensive than building a software company up to a certain level. Beyond a certain level, however, a manufacturing operation has the economies of scale that a service business, which many software companies are, when you start thinking of customer support and so on, don't have. So the paradox is that whereas in the startup stage, hardware startups are more expensive than software startups, when you're looking at massive scaling, actually the numbers can be much scarier for a software company to really grow much larger. And I think the other benefit is that, we know more or less what the formula is for a manufacturing business. You might need to discover a niche, discover new needs, implement new technology, but bottom line is we've known what a manufacturing company looks like for quite a while. Whereas I think in the social media space, if you go beyond stratospheric valuations, which of course as an entrepreneur that's all what you care about, because you cash out at that point, I'm not sure we still know all the successful businesses in the new area.
mentioned that since you launched the accelerator, you have more than 200 applications. What is your criteria whether to take on board an idea or scratch it? I think you mentioned quite importantly for you also as the recipe for success is people and also business planning. What other factors would you consider whether to take that idea on board?
Well, beyond, I mean, some obvious ones in terms of, is it actually a fit with what we do? Can we add value? Is it in an area that we know something about? The IP aspect obviously is quite important because in this space, the big danger is that you end up doing market research for a big corporation. You spend 3 or 4 years of your lifetime building up a business. Eventually, you show that somebody can buy that. So then GE or Siemens comes in. Oh, okay, that's interesting. That's a good space. We'll do it ourselves. And they put big resources and end up doing it. So IP is absolutely critical. But again, going back to the team issue, it's not necessarily whether it's an older team or a younger team. It's just about seeing commitment, seeing an ability of a multidisciplinary team to work. That they've reached real milestones, which is it's about the milestones that they've reached, but also that they have perseverance, that they've gotten to that level. They've gone through difficulty, and the team has stuck together. I mean, we have a kind of a long list of criteria, but it goes down to team, interesting technology, is it protectable, can we imagine a business in this space? Interestingly, again, I think it's different between us and VCs. In a way, I'm not too bothered if they haven't picked the right market niche, as long as they indicate that they're willing to consider alternatives. Almost invariably at this point of time, the market niche they think is the right one for them is actually not the right one for them. So what we look at is, well, can this technology be used in other niches or in other markets? Can it be, maybe this is the right niche, that this will become a huge company, but where do you start? Maybe from a different place. We've got a good example from the desalination space. Desalination is taking seawater, making potable water out of it. It's very difficult to sell technology to water utilities, very conservative, it takes ages to sell something to them. So what some very successful desal companies have done is they've taken their technology and they've sold it to shale gas exploration companies in the US. Because they've got a huge water treatment problem, because the way they take shale, environmentalists there in the crowd, but it's not exactly clean. I mean, it's pretty damaging to the environment, and they have a huge liability for that. So you can, almost in any space, you can typically identify a market niche that's going to take your product now at a much higher price point than what you're trying to focus long term. So a question for us is, can we think of some such candidate niches? Because we probably won't know the answer until we start working with them. And is the team willing to adapt?